I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Swerzik, and today I've got a full table for you guys. To my left, project engineer Miles Neville, and then across the table, haven't had him on the show for a while, fellow project engineer Ryan Damman and marketeer Preston Lentfer. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
It has been a while, but it's our pleasure.
Yeah, looking forward to some good insight from Ryan Damman. And between Ryan and Miles, they see products on a much more in-depth and technical aspect than really anybody else in the world, for when you think of it, because even our ballisticians and they don't see how the tooling is made to make the bullet. They can come up with a cool concept and help the engineering team get it flushed out, but when it goes from turn this thing on and make this machine make the product, you guys really have a very intimate relationship with all of these products. And looking forward to your insight on this one, because time of year, this morning on the Swerzik Ranch, it's 39 degrees in the about 4 a.m. hours. It's nice and sharp outside, and that weather starting to turn. Now the highs are still in the 60s or 70s. Nobody wants that, but when you feel that little bit of sharp air, it's hunting season, and the hunting season has started. Recently returned home from an antelope trip, which was successful. We've got Nebraska specifically has a antlerless only season, where if you're within 3 miles of certain rivers to try to control the whitetail population there, we have an antlerless season. So that's going on as we speak, which is great. It's just a good time of year. This is what we live for. It's what we talk about 9 months out of the year.
Yeah. And I would throw in there, in case anybody's curious about that river antlerless season. So historically, Nebraska has been a 9-day rifle season and a 15-day, now month-long, after all the seasons are done, antlerless rifle season. They threw in this river antlerless season. If you've never looked at Nebraska on a map, we're pretty flat in most parts of the state, a little bit of hills, but major highways seem to follow the rivers, right?
Where it's flat.
Right?
Yep.
And then there's crop ground, like all over next to the rivers, because that's where some of the most fertile ground is, and it's a little moist, whatever. So this river antlerless season, trying to get rid of some of the population, some of the does, not diminish it by any means, but take the pressure off of vehicles hitting deer on the highway and take some pressure off of the crops.
Yeah, a lot of people, Nebraska doesn't have that many deer as a state compared to some other high population states like Wisconsin and Michigan and, a lot of places east of us. But like you mentioned, Nebraska is kind of unique in that there are some areas which are quite flat right through the river, and that's conveniently where our major highways go through. And between hitting vehicles and then crop degradation, when you've got 100 or 120 deer per section, and then every October and November you harvest their house where they live, they have nowhere to go, and that can definitely become a problem.
Yeah, and right now is harvest time. The harvesters are fired up right now.
Yeah,
so
and there's deer running amok. Yeah. It's been crazy on the drive to work. So with that said, we live in a wonderful time to be a hunter. And with technology advancements, cartridge advancements, it's just a lot of fun, and there's a lot of information out there. But I really want to kind of debate, if you will, discuss. Yeah, maybe some debate depending on what you guys say. But what's the best whitetail cartridge? Because if you look at North America, that is the number one big game species, and states like Missouri, and I mentioned Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan, states like that. I mean, they'll put down 100,000 deer during their rifle season in a year. So there's a lot of these big game animals being hunted, or a lot of whitetails being hunted. So you can do a lot of things with a lot of things. But what do you guys think is the ideal whitetail cartridge? And to start the conversation, I'd like to just skip around a little bit. Talk to me about what your first whitetail cartridge was, maybe why you selected it, and then now, removed by a couple decades from your first whitetail cartridge, what do you feel like is ideal right now? So, Miles, you're to my left. Let's hear from you, buddy.
first whitetail cartridge was 30-06. I had, and that's purely because I'm a sucker for nostalgia. I had a M1 Garand growing up, and
That was your first rifle, deer rifle?
first deer was a mule deer with
Okay.
with my dad's 308. But yeah, my first rifle whitetail hunt was with an M1 Garand,
That's awesome.
and that was in the hills in Virginia. That ended up being about a 60-yard shot, so iron sights were no problem there. I think that was a 30-31 SKU number, the 150 grain
Yep.
Spire
Yep.
point. Yeah,
The original.
the original. Yeah, Hornady bullet. That was hand loading with IMR 4064.
Your first deer was taken with hand loads.
Yeah,
Doesn't
no, first
get-
whitetail.
First white.
Doesn't
Yeah, yeah.
get more classic than that. A 30-06 with 40-64 and 150 grain Hornady Spire point.
Yep. Yeah, and that was, like I said, purely because I wasn't interested in modern guns at all. I was kind of World War II, World War I buff.
Yeah.
I had the M1 Garand. I was like, well, yeah, this thing still works. Let's
I mean,
make
you
it
still
work.
are.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah.
Dabbling in
Yeah.
I think it's-
German and Swiss.
Yeah, German and Swiss stuff is kind of the
Some
way I've
American.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
you call him a collector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. Yeah, it's my physical savings account.
Yeah, right. Yeah, to hedge inflation. Awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, today just for whitetail, I don't know. I think 6 is a little lean. I think maybe 30 cal is probably the top end, and I think you could probably pick about anything in between.
Sure.
Um,
But if you had to pick
If
one,
you had to pick one.
dedicated optimal maybe for whitetail, it'd be a real tough call between maybe like a 6.5 Grendel or a 6.5 Creedmoor.
yeah, that's a fair option. And for most of the whitetail hunting, the shots are at a traditional range, so you don't really need to stretch the legs too
Right.
far. But
Yeah, and a Grendel or a Creedmoor, both, you can get 200-300 yards out of them, and that encompasses all of the hunting I've ever done,
Mhm.
truthfully, except for maybe antelope or something, some
Yeah.
of that other western stuff. But yeah, because I've hunted whitetail in Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, and then out in Virginia on the East Coast, and like I said, I haven't personally come across a situation where I needed to be more than 250 yards,
Mhm.
for the shot. And that even so, those bullets will perform out to 400 or 500 yards.
absolutely,
So that
You are the most traveled whitetail guy at this table.
100%. Yeah.
Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com.
Preston, let's kick it over to you here.
Well, people have heard this before on this podcast, but 270 Winchester is my first cartridge choice. And that came down to a book that I read called Whitetail Deer, written by a couple of authors. But in that book, there was a ballistic table listing all of the cartridges and their drops at, out to 500 yards, I think. And it was between, so, the eye sees what it sees, and it looks at that last yardage and how much drop is at that last yardage. And it was between the 22-250, which I felt lean.
Yep.
For whitetail hunting, and the 270. So the 270 it was, and off to Walmart we go.
Beautiful. The old 270.
Yep.
Whacking and stacking.
130 grain bullet seemed to shoot the best out of it, so that's what it got fed.
Well, and it's kind of like the 308 Winchester, with the 168 grain bullet. If you've got a 270 and it doesn't shoot 130 grain Spire point at least pretty good, the rifle's broken because that combination just works.
Yep. So yeah, it took some coyotes, a few deer. I sadly got rid of that rifle, but if you're gonna make me choose one now, and it's hard to talk about this without picturing where you hunt, right?
Yeah.
So where I hunt rifle season, it is a little bit broken. There's some hills, there's
Canyons.
draws, canyons, things like that. Not your typical Nebraska hunt, I would say, and probably not a typical whitetail hunt, thinking of eastern states, right? But there are some shot opportunities. If I had to, never have, could shoot out to 800 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So my mind goes to 6.5 Creedmoor.
Fair enough.
I think it has to.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of factors that play into that, I guess, too. Because it's not just a cartridge choice necessarily, but the 6.5 Creedmoor in the safe right now has got a very comfortable stock. It's short, it's agile, and I think stock comes into a lot as well,
yeah.
right?
A little more nuanced answer here.
Right. So you're kind of going away from the cartridge thing, but I think if you're going to have the best whitetail cartridge, you have to be able to shoot that gun good regardless of what cartridge
Prone,
it is.
standing, kneeling, tripod,
off
you
the
name
tree.
it.
You name it. So that's kind of my way out of that answer.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose one, it'd probably be a 6.5 Creamer. Ballistically, it can reach out there. An ELDX is running out of steam with that at 1,600 feet per second minimum expansion, well past where I could probably shoot.
Yep. That's a good answer. Ryan, you've had time to think on this now.
Yeah.
Let's hear about it. I'm excited.
My story, the beginning is a lot different than you guys because I grew up in the eastern states. I didn't come into hunting until my later teen years. But when I did, it's shotgun. So everybody had a rifle 12 or 20 gauge mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 gauge slug gun. It was my exposure to deer hunting at the time. And center fire rifle we didn't shoot any because we didn't have any place to shoot it.
Right.
I mean, all the properties are small. You're hunting small woodlots and not even close to the sections you're talking about out here. So my story begins mostly when I moved out here to Nebraska with Dave Emery being my boss at the time. We go back to 2011, and 6.5 Creedmoor was not nearly what it is now.
Right. Yeah, it was still kind of fledgling. I'm
asking Dave, hey, I'm going to start hunting deer with a rifle out here. So what should I get for a rifle? I didn't own one at the time. 6.5 Creedmoor, no question. And Dave tells me that. And looking back, that's going to be Dave's answer.
yeah, right.
But yeah, so that's what I did, and that's basically what I stuck with since.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was not as easy to find a 6.5 Creedmoor, so I got a Browning A-bolt, before they even had a factory offering a 6.5 Creedmoor, which is hard to think of. It was only 12 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to go to 6.5 Creedmoor as the choice then, the choice now. Basically, my whole rifle hunting whitetail life has been 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah.
Because I started later than a lot of guys.
Sure. That's interesting. I didn't think you were going there with, you started with the Creedmoor and stuck with it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, and you bring up some good points too. Like in some states you couldn't use a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Right. And
what's the answer for those states? I guess maybe we need to come up with
just
that.
In recent years, you can hunt with 450 Bushmasters big, 350 Legend now.
Yeah.
And those, as much as we prefer other cartridges out here because we have the ability to hunt with other cartridges, it's far superior options. Those guys, hey, if I can hunt with these, I'm going to. It's better than a shotgun.
Right.
So,
the accuracy potential is certainly better than a shotgun.
So for those guys, they don't have the options a lot of what western half of the United States has.
Where's that too? There's a couple states that are stuck with, like 35 Whalen is huge down in
35 Whalen.
I forget.
Indiana. There's big.
Iowa, I think.
Yeah, I'm not
like
sure.
Mississippi?
Illinois, I think.
I don't remember. I don't remember exactly where it was, but I know. Yeah, that's a popular one, and that's a very capable cartridge as far as.
Well, I bet.
Yeah,
it's a big bullet.
So if you're in a straight wall state, what are you picking?
4570.
4570.
Because you're a classic man.
Yeah, you are classic. I'd probably have to go 350 Legend.
I
mean, the 450 Bushmaster was there first, right? It was there, and you got to pay its respect. But if I'm bringing up kids, into the hunting world, I think the 350 Legend might be the better answer.
Well, and if I'm shooting something at a traditional distance, I don't need a giant bullet. I don't need blistering speed. I don't need amazing external ballistics. I just need an effective bullet that is expanding in a cartridge that's legal with the lowest recoil. And, for me, I think I'd pick the 350 Legend in that scenario.
So expanding on my answer, but part of my selection for everything I do really is because I have the ability to work on these bullets from the ground up. So that comes into play. And sometimes I have a certain affinity or something pulling me to, hey, I want to shoot that bullet just because it was cool.
Yeah.
And I shoot all these bullets in gel and develop them and everything. So having that ability, like for instance, 450 Bushmaster, that spire point that's in American Whitetail was a specifically unique bullet to make because of the cartridge design and how much case capacity is there. So, like at one point, I want to hunt with the 450 Bushmaster if I'm going back to Ohio because I hunt with that spire point just because It's kind of cool.
Well, that was a difficult
for that
bullet.
reason.
I was still in the ballistics department during
Yeah.
that time, and that was a lot more problematic than one would think. Like, oh, it's just a
Right.
big straight ball cartridge, just make a bubble bullet and put it in there. But it was actually, you had to go back to the drawing board a couple times.
Yeah. Yeah, we made make a spar point that weighs X and that's easy. Well, it wasn't necessarily that easy because that bullet gets so short.
Mhm.
You got so much case capacity, and they were sticking bullets and all kinds of pressure issues.
Twist rate came into play there too, because there was a jump in twist rates of 450 Bushmaster, it seemed, right?
From 1 in 24 to 1 in 20 or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But that
Anyway-
presented some issues, I think.
Yeah, we had to add bullet length on a lead nosed bullet without.
Making it
Making it
super
heavier.
heavy.
So how do you do that and still have a closed nose? So put a giant bubble in the inside.
Yeah. Well, and from a terminal performance standpoint, I mean, I've not shot anything with it, but I've seen recovered bullets, seen photos, I've seen video footage. That bullet is a very effective bullet in the Bushmaster.
Yeah, for what it is, yeah, it works.
And I think I can't speak for Ryan, but I imagine it's this way too. But seeing what we see with gel is like a deciding factor for us more so than the cartridge. It's the way the bullet behaves at velocity regimes.
Mm-hmm.
You get a much better picture, and it's seeing what actually happens in ballistic gel, like real ordnance ballistics gel, is kind of an eye opener as
Sure.
far as this cartridge does this, but and this cartridge does this, but are they the same bullet type construction? Because you can
Yeah.
overcome a lot of disparity in size. And so you'd look at, if I were to just show you blocks of gel that were shot with a 6 arc 103 and a 6.5 Creedmoor 143 ELDX, I mean, you almost might have a hard time picking those two apart. And you see, a little 6 arc and 6.5 Creedmoor, but the way those bullets are designed to expand and the cavities that they produce is really not incredibly different. So it's a kind of an equalizer. Bullet construction can be an equalizer.
That's true.
Exactly.
This may not be the podcast for it, but since I have all of you three here, I read the comments. Believe it or not, we read all the comments. So when you're commenting, you're saying they. Well, I'm reading it, so you don't have to say they. You can just say you.
You.
But all three of you here, why don't we talk a little bit about some of the shortcomings of, some clear ballistics gel, some other ways of testing bullets that you've seen on the internet, whether it be water going through wood, whether it be going through whatever medium,
Newspapers, milk jugs.
compared to
phone books,
ordnance gelatin.
Yeah, well, the FBI and the Department of Defense, they put a lot of research into the development of the ordnance gel, and you'll see a couple like different departments and agencies will have maybe 10% or 20% ordnance gel, and that's just the amount of like it's made kind of like Jello, right? Like you mix a powder into water, so it's a water-based thing with that gelatin in there, and it's just the percent that the 10%. There's 10% of the total mass makeup is gelatin powder, or 20% is 20%. But so there's a little bit of leeway there. One's more like a lean, bony, muscular structure. One's more of like a fatty, like guts or whatever structure. So it's meant as an average composition of what you'd encounter. Obviously, you can't put bones in there, right? And then like people put like dead bones into gel, and that's not really accurate because a live bone and a dead bone behave
Wildly different.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuances to this too, because and not every animal is a block of gel either, right? You can get presentations where you're shooting through lungs where there's air gap. You can shoot through sinew. You can shoot through bone, and it's not the same as gel. But as a uniform test media to kind of get a good picture of how a bullet is going to perform in that media, it's probably the best thing out there. When you get into like the clear ballistic stuff, it just offers less resistance. So they market it as, FBI ordnance or whatever they call FBI, calibrated gel. And it may calibrate a BB, the way that the FBI gel does, but time and time again, we've seen where they're just not quite the same. So what you'll typically see in clear ballistics gel is you'll require a higher impact velocity for an expansion to initiate. You'll see less total expansion. You'll see deeper penetration.
It always seems like the permanent wound cavities are much smaller.
Yeah. Yep.
And deeper usually, right?
Yeah. So that's that more penetration. They're just less. It offers less resistance, and I'm sure it's probably temperature variable, but on the it's a trade-off because for practicality, for people who don't have the ability to mix up gel, which is expensive,
ballistics gelatin,
our
ballistics gelatin.
ordnance ballistics gelatin is an expensive process, and it's a very delicate process. It's like you kind of have to know what you're doing. And it doesn't last forever. If you mix it up, throw it in the fridge, you got a few
week.
days, to use it. Otherwise, but whereas that clear ballistic stuff, well, you can buy it, we can shoot the hell out of it, and then we can melt it down and reuse it, remold it.
And or I can set it on my desk and it looks cool.
Right, exactly. And it doesn't smell like wet dog, and it's not slimy, so...
Those are really good benefits.
Well, and that's a comparison between clear gel and ordnance gel.
Right.
I mean, how would you approach people that are doing the quote unquote backyard testing with water jugs or wet phone book?
That stuff is, it totally Wild West as far as how realistic that is. There may be some of it that may end up being surprisingly close, but then some of it not even
so
at all.
Well, it seems like the common one is water, right?
Yeah. And water itself is way harsher to the bullet than gel or like animal material. Yeah. And so, you'll see bullets shed cores and jackets and totally rip apart when they hit water. That's just a much way more resistance than the gelatin or what you'd expect in an animal.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway, the clear gel, kind of feels like a fishing lure kind of material. If you're just like, oh, you want to see an expanded bullet and kind of what the wound cavity looks like, great. If you're trying to test it at ends of the spectrum, high velocity, low velocity, so close range, long range, if you're trying to see what a bullet does outside of what I'm going to call the sweet spot, that's probably not the material for you. Although it is convenient and there's some truth to that.
If you're in well within the expansion envelope and you want to use it as a comparative tool, as to what does one bullet, bullet A and bullet B and bullet C, how do they expand, how do they penetrate, just as a comparative, not as like an absolute test. Oh, well, it's going to go, like if it goes 20 inches in clear ballistics, that doesn't mean it's going to go 20 inches in an animal necessarily. But if you want to say, okay, what does the expanded bullet look like here, 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 and you're well within the envelope with all three of those bullets, that may be a valid kind of comparison.
It's useful there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That was kind of a divergence from the topic, but worthwhile nonetheless. That just for the listener and also just understand for the listener, we shoot so many bullets into actual calibrated ordnance gelatin, and then we use these before we launch them on hunts, on game animals, and like Ryan mentioned, you guys get to see the production and how easy are they to make, and how often do we have accuracy problems and stuff like that. So you get to, you really get a cherry pick, like, every time we set that bullet up, it just hammers, which is convenient.
The Hornady Trek Light Lockbox XXL, constructed of an advanced impact-resistant polycarbonate featuring dual 4-digit TSA locks. The Trek Light Lockbox offers heavy-duty protection at a third of the weight of steel. The included 1,500-pound rated security cable with patented cable connector maximizes cargo space for up to 2 full-sized handguns. The Trek Light Lockbox XXL from Hornady Security.
So before we go on too far, most people have heard this story as well, but my first deer cartridge, 257 Roberts, I had no say in that. That was just Seth's old enough to hunt deer, something low recoil. Dad always had an affinity for the 25 cal, so Seth gets a Ruger M77 in 257 Roberts, and the rest is history. And that was killed every whitetail I'd ever shot at.
About as classic as it gets.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
M77.
And there's still a few of us 257 Bob shooters out there. Unrelated, Kelly Glaus out in Wyoming drew his now once in a lifetime Wyoming bighorn sheep tag. Just connected here last Sunday, 257 Roberts. So that's pretty cool. Hornady bullet, by the way.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty neat. But now when I kind of flip to, okay, what's the ideal cartridge? I think about me whitetail hunting, and I am not a worldwide whitetail hunter like Miles traveling all over the country. Where I have hunted whitetail, there have been potential needs, but I haven't had to use them, luckily, for some moderate range capabilities, not long range kind of stuff, but for like, you're hunting canyons, you're hunting the sandhills, you might have to take that 450-yard shot, 500-yard shot, just because there's simply no bridging that gap. So I'd want something with a little horsepower behind it for those shots. And then again, anywhere east of where we currently reside, eastern Nebraska and the rest of the eastern states where, just the topography and the density of the woods, you might not have those range options. You don't need anything. You don't need a huge hammer. I really think I want to say something different just to be different. But, and I'm going to, the 6.5 Creedmoor for almost all cases is just awesome. But when I start to narrow it down, I usually like to shoot the smallest caliber I can talk myself into shooting. So a 6mm Creedmoor really comes to mind because it's fat. I can shoot a 20-inch barrel and do 2,900 with that 103 ELDX. With a suppressor, I mean, that's just a little hot rod. And the 243 Winchester, for the decades, since the 50s, has been one of America's go-to whitetail cartridges. But I really think for a little bit more forgiveness, if you go just up a caliber, I really think the 6.5mm, and I would opt for a 6.5 PRC. And we've talked about this, but here's why. It's a little bit much for a whitetail, obviously, but if I can run a 24 or a 26-inch barreled 6.5 Creedmoor, I can get those same velocities from a 20-inch barrel and a 6.5 PRC. I like to run things short, strap the can on there, and I'm good to go. And I think that for me, for hunting whitetail in western Nebraska is a lot different than hunting them, say, in Missouri. And I think, I'd want a cartridge that I could shoot effectively, past that quarter-mile mark, but is also not horribly overgunned for things, in the eastern side of the state. So that's where I fall. But I'm curious, we could discuss this, why nobody said 270 or 30 cal, because the 308 Winchester, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the 308 Winchester and the 7mm 08 and the 243 Winchester.
Well, and I was going to say, like, here's the cop out, right? I said 6.5 Creedmoor, you said 6.5 Creedmoor. I have no qualms taking a 243, a 708, a 6mm Creedmoor, a 308.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those cartridges are fantastic and will do the job at moderate ranges. Heck, even a little bit extended.
Yeah.
And I say that, like, I do want to throw this out there. I mentioned 800 yards earlier from, like, canyon to canyon. I've never done that in my life.
Yeah, that's
my longest shot on a critter is 365 yards, and that was a coyote. So, like,
it's a great shot, by the way.
It was a lucky shot because it was running. But there are so many tools to get this one job done.
Yes.
It's not even funny.
Yeah. It really is.
If you have one gun already, likely it's going to work.
It's going to work.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our next point.
I was going to say, I was joking before we started the podcast, but I'd pulled out about that much of the reloading handbook.
Most of the reloading handbook.
Yeah, of what would be a good whitetail cartridge.
Yeah.
If we're being honest.
So the real answer, there is no ideal whitetail cartridge. Everybody, different strokes for different folks, but I think we do need to spend some time talking about, I mentioned everything on the 308 Winchester case. Up and down from 308 Winchester, that is, you can't go wrong. You can't make a wrong choice. But bullet performance in the last 20 years has changed drastically. It almost seemed like, okay, lead core bullets, expanding bullets, that's a thing. And then for many, many decades, we C-can ogives were helpful, inner grooves were helpful, the inner lock was helpful. There's some advancements that were major at the time. Well, now with the ELDX, for example, or the SST, or there's a lot of other bullets out there. There's different things we're doing with jacket thickness and how we're holding these bullets together. That those old, you have to have this bullet with this much energy to do the job. It doesn't work anymore. So bullet selection becomes almost as important, if not more important, than the cartridge selection. As
Exampled by Miles's gel talk with the 6mm ARC 103 ELDX versus a 6.5 Creedmoor 143 ELDX. One's this big, one's this big, and the gelatin looks almost identical.
Yeah. Ryan, how do you get that performance when you're designing bullets. How can you get that performance where a Pipsqueak 6mm from a terminal performance standpoint looks very, very similar to its big brother, a 6.5 Creedmoor with the same style of bullet? How does that work from a bullet design standpoint?
So,
what kind of knobs do you turn?
You're looking for where that bullet's going to live. At the end of the day, you're designing this bullet to has an intended use, a certain cartridge, a certain velocity window, thinking about what's the muzzle velocity is going to be about, and if people are going to be using this for hunting, where's your impact velocity is going to be, and then it's kind of your landing point there.
So you start at the end.
And it's like, okay, I know this bullet needs to do well between 2,000 and 2,500 feet a second impact, or for example, you can start tweaking jacket thickness and how tight, if it's a tip bullet, assuming, let's go with the tip bullet because most stuff is now that new hotness stuff.
Yeah, polymer tips.
We can manipulate how that lead crowds that tip or sets back away from that tip and the geometry of that cavity underneath the tip, and that really affects how that tip wants to set back and how that expansion is initiated and how much lead is supporting that jacket as it peels back, all those things. And then you look at where that jacket's peeling back at, say, 2,800 feet a second. Oh, I know it's peeling back way too much there, but I still need to hold up at $2,000 or open up at $2,000.
Yeah, or 1,800 or whatever.
So you start tweaking all those dimensions, and we're talking thousands. Bullet construction is a game of thousands or tenths of thousands.
Wow.
So you start tweaking that and adjusting tooling to get what you want. And that's how you can get a 103 grain bullet shot in a gel. You see the gel react, dumps a bunch of energy right away, goes 18 inches. You shoot a 143 grain bullet. You can tweak those things I was just talking about to have that same result in gel, even though they're 50% heavier bullet and it might maybe going slower or faster. You have tools to manipulate how that bullet reacts when it hits medium.
That's really interesting that, you can manipulate those things, and it's not just, we want it to weigh this much, so that's how much lead goes in there. You're really working with the lead height, how it crowds, like you said, how you crowd the tip and how big the cavity is in there. And I feel like not everyone who's a hunter really appreciates how much work goes in to the bullet design.
Yeah, I think,
definitely.
Growing up, I was probably like, did I hit where I was aiming at? Did I drop it, or did I get a blood trail? If the deer ran off, did I get a blood trail? I'm happy if I did. I'm unhappy if I didn't. That's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
But there are so many things that are going on behind the curtain. And that's another thing I think we could talk about too is in today's age, and production is through the roof. Things are getting better on the shelves, it seems. There are no shortage of choices. If you want a bullet to work a certain way, there's a bullet probably on the shelf for you. And maybe you need to do a little bit of research, email us, ask us questions, whatever. But
call our tech line.
Absolutely. If you're in the thick Texas brush and you want to anchor him, or you're in the thick Texas brush and you'd rather have an entrance and an exit guaranteed, there's 2 bullets for both of those, right?
Yeah.
And shot placement plays a huge factor into that. But
right on.
There are different bullets for different applications, the way you want a bullet to work.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's another interesting thing too, is like, we test in ballistics gel, and ballistics gel is consistent, and it's the same presentation every time. And we get really consistent results, in ballistics gel, but every hunt is different, every animal is different, every shot presentation is different, like the mental and physiological state of every animal when they get shot is different, and it's
for sure.
It's amazing. I don't know, one of my favorite pastimes is going on like retailer websites and reading the bad reviews for hunting bullets, because it's just and then the good reviews as well. But I mean, across the board, you get bad stories and good stories, all the way across.
With the same performance too.
Yeah, or the bullet performance doesn't align with the expectations of the hunter. That's right. More of what I see. Where this, we'll talk about the SST, which in my opinion, for the hefty majority of whitetail hunting, is probably a Hornady go-to bullet. I mean, that bullet is rapid and violent in its expansion, and for 200-pound deer, it's just perfect. But some people will say, "Oh my gosh, I hit the deer, high shoulder, anchored him, he didn't go anywhere. This is amazing." Same bullet, different person. I hit the deer, high shoulder, he fell in his tracks, but the bullet didn't exit. What a failure. It's like,
Right.
yeah, but it's just because the performance didn't align with their expectations. So, definitely something to, get educated on with our resources that are available online on our website. Reach out to us directly, drop comments, and that tech line, 800-338-3220, extension 3. That'll get you there, and those tech guys can walk you through which bullet is right for you. And that's why we make so many of them. The ELDX is probably the most universal because it works at all ranges. But, if you're got a specific need in mind, we got a bullet for you.
Yeah.
Power and performance in the palm of your hand. Hornady Handgun Hunter Ammunition. Built around the tough copper alloy Monoflex handgun bullet that features a proprietary elastomer tip, deep penetration, and high weight retention. Handgun Hunter Ammunition. As rough and rugged as the conditions and game demand.
What's your guys' favorite whitetail bullet?
Ooh, whitetail. Yeah, I'm probably with you, either interlock or SST. I mean, my thing is, for the vast majority of whitetail hunting I've ever done or seen, it's been fairly moderate range.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't really needed, the ELDX stuff, but SST and interlocks work. Overall, as a hunting bullet, I'm really impressed with our CX line.
Yeah, the CX is man.
I think it's a little much. I mean, because it's just gonna. I mean, the penetration capability you get. Not that. Yeah, I mean, you're not really leaving anything on the table. I just think it's a little bit of a heavy built bullet for whitetail. But for any other big game, mule deer, elk, stuff like that, it's an easy go to. Bear,
awesome.
Stuff like that. Yeah, where you got a little bit more.
Might as well throw it out there. You went on a bear hunt, didn't you?
Yeah.
What'd you take?
90 grain CX and a 6 arc.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, he did. Preston, what are you thinking?
Easy answer, ELDX. It has outperformed my expectations every time I've used it to harvest an animal. 150. First time I used it, brand new in tech. You had me building a 6.5 Creedmoor, and how it was heavier than all could be, and good thing we didn't have to walk very far.
It shot well.
It shot really good, really good. Probably best factory barrel I've ever had on a gun, but 150-yard shot first time, hand loads, 2650, 143 LDX. Oh man, that's too close. That bullet's gonna blow up. It's gonna rapidly expand. I'm not gonna get an exit. Nope. That thing went through, tore the heart in half, all the way through on the other side. Best blood trail I've probably ever had out of a rifle cartridge. It was impressive.
Yeah.
And then henceforth, it's been great. That being said, at traditional to moderate ranges, I wouldn't be upset using any of them. Interlock is a great bullet.
Mm-hmm.
It's been killing stuff for a long, long time. SSD's just fine. There's not a wrong answer. You just have to have your expectations proper for the bullet that you're shooting.
Right on. I think I know Ryan's answer, but we'll see. Ryan, what's your favorite whitetail bullet?
Yeah, ELDX.
Yeah,
for sure. But
I probably stole that from him.
That's
an
easy answer for me, just because I worked on that and I've used that, and every deer I've killed has been with. Every deer I've killed in Nebraska has been with that bullet with a rifle.
Sure.
Never had any issues with it, and I love it. But on that same note, like you were talking about the CX, a lot of times, and kind of the review thing and everybody, but the guys' expectations, whitetails, a lot of guys are hunting for meat, myself included, and I've even considered changing to a solid, to CX.
Yep.
Just to do it for a few seasons to see. A lot of times your shot placement isn't exactly as you may have wished, and that deer might be quartered, and you get it in the behind the shoulder, perfect lung shot, but they were quartered away a bit. Now your back shoulder just got destroyed. You lose a bunch of meat just because that bullet is penetrating and expanding. The wound channel is so big. The CX, you aren't going to get that same violent energy dump as you do in a SST or ELDX. And so that's something important to meat.
Right on.
Saving a little more meat, probably be better off with the CX.
Yeah,
sure.
So I've had that consideration here lately.
Yeah, good answer. I'm still, the ELDX is the easy answer because it does so many things well, and whether we're hunting Sandhills, Nebraska, taking 400-yard shots, or eastern Nebraska in the woods, and you're taking 40-yard shots. It just works. But the first deer in my younger teen years were killed with SSTs and interlocks. And, man, 117 grain 25 cal SST, hand-loaded out of, either 257 Roberts or 25-06. I mean, that is fast, flat, hits like a hammer. SST for whitetails, just phenomenal. The classic interlock, you can't go wrong. But, man, when you're trying to think of what's the best, well, because of the huge variety of shot distances and angles and, whatever, I think the ELDX is just about as safe of an answer as you could possibly make.
And it's affordable, too.
Yeah.
Like, it is priced right. I'm thinking hand load because I hand load most everything, but cannot beat that level of performance for the money that you're paying for it.
Yep.
Can't do it.
I think that's fair.
Yep, that's a fair answer. Well, we probably, I don't think
we better diverge a little bit.
Okay.
Again. In the comments, let us know what you think is the best whitetail deer cartridge. And I've been reading them. I read all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have two answers. What is the one cartridge?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but on top of that, I want to know where you're from, because can't read all the comments.
Too.
Because regionally, I've always thought it was interesting. And Preston, I don't know if you experienced this, but when I was up in technical services answering the phone, you could, if it was a 243 or a 708, Georgia, South Carolina, that kind of place. 300 Win Mag, Pennsylvania. I don't know what it was, but it was like everyone I talked to about bullet selection or cartridge, whatever for whitetail deer, Pennsylvania, they've seemed to really like the 300 Win Mag, and it could just be the rotation of the calls. That's what I got, but it seemed to trend that way. But I'd be curious to see regionally if there are any trends on what's the popular whitetail cartridge in your area.
Yep. And the reason I throw out the comment thing is a lot of those comments that I'm talking about where you're giving multiple answers is from the What Would You Choose? One Cartridge, One Bullet podcast.
Yep.
And I think there's somebody here at the table that has not answered.
Ryan Damman, you have to pick one cartridge and one bullet for the rest of your life. What is it?
You have unlimited guns.
Unlimited ammo.
Unlimited, yeah. But you're stuck to one cartridge.
For any
one
game
bullet.
hunting, anything.
Match shooting, game hunting, plinking, you name it.
I'd have to go a little bit bigger than like.
Talk us through it.
Don't leave anything
my brain
out.
initially goes 6.5 Creedmoor 143 LDX, but then I think
It's a great answer.
It's a good answer.
I want a little more
oomph,
just in case.
6.5
So I
Creedmoor's
jumped-
recently taken a grizzly bear.
I'm not
Tyler
saying
Friel,
it's not capable.
up in Alaska, he did it. He called it the 6.5 bleed more.
Yeah,
But I like your thought process.
All right, go ahead.
so I think I changed to a CX, and I'm thinking elk and moose here.
Attaboy.
7 PRC 160 CX.
Touch blue, make it true.
That is a great answer.
That is a great
Now,
answer.
You're a hunter, right?
Right. So yeah, that's
You're
what
not
I'm
really a
thinking
match
about. I'm
shooter.
not thinking. Yeah.
Yep.
If I was playing in both those worlds, my answer would likely be different there.
Now,
but-
I want to pick this a little bit because in the 2014, 2015 timeframe, you were the project engineer working with Joe, our assistant director of engineering, Jaden and Dave, who are ballistic engineers, and you as a mechanical engineer, you guys worked on the ELDX.
Yep.
That's your baby.
Right.
And you didn't choose the 175 ELDX. You went 160 CX. What's the thought process?
So again, like we were talking earlier about us being able to see how we develop all these bullets from the get-go. We see how gel reacts in real time, not just looking at a picture after the fact of a permanent wound cavity. You see that gel react to different bullets.
Mhm.
And the 175 LDX is a great bullet. However, I know a CX is going to penetrate deeper more often. If in my future I see a moose hunt or more elk hunts.
Yeah, moose is on the brain here, I can tell.
Yeah, I talked to Joe about this
Yeah.
lately. But, I want something that's going to do everything I can to get through that animal as much as possible. And a 175 LDX is dumping way more energy right at
Yeah, the first
initial
12 inches, yeah.
So that's my thought process there, and I'm not losing much on BC there.
No, you're not losing much
Because-
drag potential.
Yeah. So
The new CXs are pretty sexy.
The 160 CX, along with a host of others, the 190 CX and the 300 PRC, the 130 and the 6.5 and the 90 and 6 millimeter, the 160 and a 7 millimeter is
monster.
about as sexy of a bullet as you can make, meaning long boat tail, long ogive, low drag design, and make it work in a 1 and 8 twist.
And so when we did the 175 ELDX, 7 PRC was not a thing,
Mhm.
and it was we need to make it a 162 that's mag length for a 7 mag, Sammy length 7 mag. That's 162. Well, let's make the one that's a little bit longer for anybody else that's not loading,
Yeah.
or that is hand loading, and we're not doing
You
fact
had
ammo.
custom 7 mag chambers, like, you have a
Yep.
7 mag with
Yep.
one of those chambers. You had the 7 LRM from Gunworks that was out there, 7 practical, people necking
7
down.
rums are out
Yeah,
there.
7
But-
rums. At
but
the
still,
time,
at the time, like going back, I would have made that ogive sleeker and longer and bump the BC on that 175. But at
It's
the time,
still
that
no
was
slouch.
that was
Yeah.
a good ogive. So
Yeah.
when we did the 160, okay, we're making this for the 7 PRC. We can make this. We know it's going to be an 8 twist guns. Let's make this as good as we can do on
Mhm.
this platform.
awesome. That's a good answer. And you can literally hunt almost anything in the world, certainly everything on this continent, with that combination right there, from brown bear to moose to elk to whitetail deer, prairie dogs, you name it. It's a good answer. Solid answer.
Thanks.
Prairie dogs.
Well, I mean, he's only got one cartridge.
He's only got the one.
It's for the kill, and he can have 8 guns lined up so the barrels don't get hot.
Yeah.
So one cartridge, one bullet, but unlimited barrels and rifles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As much ammo as you want too.
This is clearly a made-up hypothetical,
Oh, of course.
but we've had a lot of
It's
good
fun.
answers. So with that, guys, we really appreciate you talking to us about the ideal whitetail cartridge, which, surprise, surprise,
There's a lot.
they're all ideal. You can kill anything with anything. And in the hierarchy of things, whatever's number 1 beats number 2 and 3, but 2 or 3 are important as well. And number 1 is shot placement. Number 2 and number 3, bullet expansion and bullet penetration. Those 3 things, regardless if you're shooting 22 cal if it's legal, 375 cal if you want to, or bigger. So shot placement is always king. And there's a lot of great cartridges out there, a ton of great bullets out there. And hopefully the listener is getting excited because it's hunting season. Anything else on whitetail cartridges, boys?
Drop it in the comments.
so.
Let us know where you're from.
Yeah.
What you think the best cartridge is. We'd love to know.
We didn't even touch on it, but I would say a lot of game and parks / law offices that control game regulations in certain states, rules are antiquated. I'll just throw that out there.
That's that's true. Well, and it just haven't kept up with the rapid development of bullet technology.
In the past couple decades, yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Decade for sure.
So, yeah, there's a lot of right answers. State to state, there might be a couple of wrong ones in there. So just make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Right on. Miles,
Yep.
anything else?
I think we got her.
We got her. All right. Well, good luck this season, guys. I know we got some hunts coming up. By the time this airs, Preston's elk tag's coming right up. So
Can't wait for that 300 PRC 212 ELDX.
taking the 300 PRC. I know we've got some other hunts coming up. River Antlers list is going on. Nebraska's rifle season's coming up. It's archery season. Good stuff all the way around. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you.
You guys.
Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast about the ideal whitetail cartridge. As you know, there is no ideal cartridge, but there's one that's ideal for you, and Hornady has a cartridge and bullet and ammo option for you. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.